All right, we're going to look at the next 4 Codingbat assignments that were assigned, starting with list doubler, and we'll end on mean finder. So it's these 4. Let's get to it. Okay, so for list doubler, it takes in a list as input, goes through the list, and multiplies each item in that list by 2, then it returns the modified list. So for example, if I had list doubler 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, it'll be 0, 2, 2, 4, 6, 10, etc. If I had 1, 2, 3, list doubler will output 2, 4, and 6. So this one's pretty straightforward. In our notes video about doing lists with loops, we have pretty much directly seen how to do this. So let's just get to it. I know that I have my list. I'm going to create a while loop for this one because the for loop will not edit the list as I'm going through. It just does it that one time. So I'm going to make a counter, set it equal to 0. I'm going to say while the counter is less than the length of my list. And while I'm less than the length of my list, I'm going to say list at counter equals list at counter times 2, right? What I'm doing here is, so this while is telling me I'm going through the whole list, and then I'm saying, all right, the list at index 0 and then index 1 is equal to itself times 2, because I'm just doubling it. After this, I need to do the counter is equal to itself plus 1, so I move through the list, and I think that should be it, right? Once I'm done with that, I'm just going to return the list. And so let's look at this one step at a time before we run it. The counter starting out at 0. So then the first time I go through the loop, 0 is going to be less than the length of the list. I'm going to go to the list at index 0, right? So here would be, this would be for this list doubler 1, 2, 3, it would be here. And I'd set it equal to itself, 1 times 2. And then I set the counter to itself plus 1. So now counter goes from 0 to 1. 1 is still less than the length of this list. And now I'm at list counter at 1, which is here. So it'll be 2 times 2, 4. It's looking good. If we run it, it shows all of the correct work there. We're done. This is your list doubler, right? I just do my loop through the list, make the counter. The counter is less than the length of the list. The adding pattern, and here's all I'm doing, right? This is the actual part of the function that I'm making where I'm saying the list at that index is equal to itself times 2 because I'm supposed to be multiplying each item in the list by 2. Let's keep moving on. That was list doubler. We're going to move on to, so in the previous assignment, last week we had 1, 2 switcheroo. This one we had first, last, switcherast. So this one, instead of just switching the first 2, which we already saw how to do, we're switching the first one with the last one. So if I have first, second, third, now it's going to say third, second, first. If I have cat, dog, parakeet, fish, it's now going to switch the cat and fish. So it'll say fish, dog, parakeet, cat. For this, we're going to need another loop. No, we don't need another loop for this. What am I talking about? We're going to need our trusty holder variable. Whenever we want to switch around a thing in a list, we just need a holder. I'm going to set that equal to list at 0. And now I'm going to say, all right, holder is holding on to the first item in the list. So it's holding on to cat, right? I want to switch list at 0 to be equal to what's at the end, right? So now I'm putting fish into cat. So list at 0 is going to be equal to list at, and here's kind of the hard part of this, right? I need the length of my list, but because I start at index 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, I need the length of my list minus 1 because the list length is 4 here, and I need index 3. So I'm going to say the length of my list minus 1. And what this is doing, my holder is holding on to cat so I don't lose it. Now I'm saying, all right, the first item in the list is equal to the last item in the list using the length minus 1. That was an important part from the previous video too. And then finally I can say, all right, well, the list at the length of the list minus 1, which again is just the last item in the list, that's going to be set equal to my holder. It's almost identical to first, last, switcherast. Sorry, first 1, 2 switcheroo, except we're just doing, instead of the first and second item, 0 and 1, we're doing 0 and the last item, right? I probably should have read this part, by the way. So first, last, switch, last takes an input, list as input, switches the items in the first and last indices of the list, and then returns the altered list. So I did the switching around. Now I just need to return the list that has been altered. So let's run it. And like that, it's showing that it's good, right? It took the first item in the list, index 0, and it held on to it in the holder variable. Then the first item in the list, I set it equal to the last item in the list. And the way I got to the last item in the list, even though this list has 3 items, this one has 4, and this has a lot, I say the length of my list minus 1, that will always get me the final index of my list. Now that the first item in the list, listed 0, is holding on to the last item in the list, I just had to go again to the last item in the list and set it equal to what the holder was holding on to, which is back over here. It was holding on to the first item. Let's keep going. From first, last, switch, last to every other doubler. Ooh, this might be, these last two get kind of tricky. Every other doubler in mean finder. Let's try it out. Every other doubler takes in a list as input, and then starting at index 0, multiplies every other item in the list by 2. So for example, if we had a list of just a whole bunch of 2s, it would return, so it's 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Now it's going to just double every other item. So 4 and then 2, that's one is untouched. 4 and then 2, untouched. 4, and that's the whole thing. And it just says, notice how every other item in the list has been multiplied by 2. So we can look back, maybe, at our list doubler, which is probably not saved. Oh, it is saved. That's fantastic. Our list doubler, which we made a loop. We went through the entire list and multiplied everything in the list by 2. And what we want to do now is, instead of multiplying everything in the list by 2, only every other item. So starting here, I multiply 0 by 2, it's 0. 1 stays the same. 1 times 2 becomes 2. 2 stays the same. 3 times 2 becomes 6. That's the idea of what this is supposed to be doing. So I might even just copy all this over, because if I have that, at least it's like a place to start, right? If I copy all that over, this is going to double everything in the list. And we can just take a look to see how that is. And look, every other item is okay. It's saying, hey, this is okay. 0 to 0, it's good. 2, I expected it to be a 1. The 2 here, oh yeah, it's supposed to be a 2. The 4 here, that's supposed to be a 2. And that's because we are multiplying everything in the list by 2. Instead here, we are currently multiplying everything in the list by 2. It only wants you to multiply every other item in the list by 2. I mean, that's why it's called every other doubler. There are 2 ways you can do this. If you want to, I'll show the weird way first, and then I'll show the right way, or the cleaner way later. The weird way would be just keeping this exactly as it is, but then I could say, all right, if the counter divided by 2.0 is equal to 0, then I will multiply by 2. And what this is saying is, if I divide my counter by 2 and it's 0, that will only be true on every other number, on 0 and then 2 and then 4. And I believe if I run it like this, that will almost work? No, it doesn't even work at all. What the heck? That's really weird. Hey, well, you know what? That's why I said it's a weird way. Here's, I mean, maybe if I do counter modulus 2, if counter mod 2 is 0, that should be okay. Yeah, all right. Why was the divided by 2 not working out? Oh, I know why it wasn't working out. You see it on the live. I think it's supposed to be 0.0, and then it would work out. Nope, I don't know. Whatever. Mod 2. Shoot, what's going on? Switch this to modulus 2 equals 0.0. Okay, so this one works. This is really weird. This is not how I expected you to solve it, but let's take a look at it. The modulus operator, what this thing does is it divides, but then it gives you the remainder. So now if my counter, if I want to go every other one, if I divide by 2 and get a remainder of 0, then Oh, that's why it wasn't working. Don't worry about it. Then that means I'm on a multiple of 2. I'm on 0, 2, 4, or 6. And so then I do want to multiply by 2. This was confusing. If you got confused by that, here's really the smarter way to do this. Without the modulus, though it will work using an if like this. Instead, and it's going to seem really dumb, instead of doing counter equals counter plus 1, I can change this, right? This doesn't always need to be going one at a time. I can just go to every other item in the list. So if I start at counter equals counter plus 2, well, what this will do is counter starts at 0, and then counter plus 2, it'll be 2, and then it'll be 4, and then it'll be 6. And those are the indices I want to multiply, right? I want to multiply at 0, skip 1, 2, skip 3, 4, skip 5, right? So this by itself, without doing that weird if modulus operator, if I just count by 2s, I'm only going to every other item in the list. If I run it again, you see it runs good. Let's move on to the final one, which was the mean finder. So the mean finder, mean finder takes in, oops, I should edit that, a list of numbers as input. It goes through the list, does some calculations, which you need to figure out what to do, and then outputs the mathematical mean of the list. So just we'll do a quick little refresher. Mean is you take the list. To find the mean, the average of it, you just add all of them up and divide by the number of things you added up. So to get the mean of this list, which it says should have an output of 2, I would do 1 plus 2 plus 3. That gives me 6. 6 I divide by the number of things I multiplied by, or a number of things I added. 1 plus 2 plus 3, so 6 divided by 3. The mean should have been 2. We actually haven't used the hint at all. What does this one say? Again, another loop will be needed here. This is very similar to the list sum example in our notes video with just a slight twist. So this is very similar to our list sum example. If you want to go back and check the other video before you get this one given away, but let's just jump into it. So the mean finder, I need to make a loop, so I'm going to have my counter, and I'm also going to need a sum, right? A sum of my list, and I'll set that equal to 0, because at first I need to add all of these things up, and then I divide by the number of things I added. So now I've got my counter, I've got my sum. Let's make that loop. You know what? Let's not do it with a counter. Yeah, let's not do it with a counter. For those of us, actually, I was very surprised from all the comments on for loops versus while loops. It was pretty split. I thought more people were going to like while loops, but maybe that's just because I like while loops. But it was like pretty half and half, that people liked for loops and other people liked while loops. Anyways, let's jump into it. We'll use a for loop this time because I've been using while loops so far. So I'm going to say for item in list, right? This is making my for loop for every item in the list. I'm going to set sum list equal to itself plus the item, right? This will go through the entire list and it will add all of them up. So now sum list, I did my for loop. This is why people like for loops, because they're so pretty, right? It's just boom, 2 lines, you're done. My sum list is equal to now the sum of all the items. And now what I need to do is I should get the average, and I'm going to say, or maybe I'll call it the mean since this is mean. The mean should be equal to the total sum divided by the number of things that I added up. Now, I could have done a counter to count it, but also the length of the list tells us this, right? I've got 0, 1, 2, except the length here is 3, so I should just be able to say the length of my list, and I should be good. And at the end there, I can just return the mean, right? So let's just go over this before we check. Well, maybe I should check to see if it works or not before we go over it. Oh, shoot. Okay. It does not work, except it kind of does, right? It's 6.0. We ran at 6. 2.0, we ran at 2. 5.5, we ran it at 5. I believe if we just say, oh, right, sum list is a float and the length of the list is a float, it won't do integer division here, we should be good. Hey, look at that. It is looking good. So let's just review, make sure that we understand what this little function that I wrote over here is, and we're good for this video. So the definition, mean finder list, right? That's just the start of my function. Sorry, I don't know why I started reading there. So it takes in a list as input, and we're trying to find the mean. I started out by coming up with a variable starting at 0, which is the sum that it'll hold on to. I did my fancy little for loop, only 2 lines. That's why people like it. For each item in the list, so for every single item in this list, it's going to, it'll run through the entire list that way, changing the variable item to every single item as it goes through one at a time. And for each of those, I said the sum list was equal to itself plus that item. So sum list started at 0. Going through this one, it then became 1, and then 1 plus 2 became 3, and then 3 plus 3 became 6. And then at the end, I said that the mean for my list was the sum for the whole list divided by the length of that list, because the length of that list will be how many items I added up, and that's how you calculate the mean. And at the end, I returned mean, and last thing was just we had an error where we had to change both of these to floats, so it wasn't doing integer division. That is it for these 4 Codingbat assignments. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, I try to, when we have the short response things here, I try to respond to those and pay attention and read through them. So yeah, if you have any questions, send me an email or do that in the Edpuzzle. And yeah, cheers. See you on the next one.